Before we begin, I want to take a moment to thank each and every one of you watching this. Your support, your comments, your stories you share with me, they mean more than you know. If this story resonates with you, if it gives you chills or makes you think differently about what might be hiding in the wilderness, hit that like button and drop a comment below. Tell me what you think. Your engagement is what keeps this channel alive. Now let's talk about one of the most classified military operations of World War II. One that had nothing to do with Nazis or Japanese soldiers, and everything to do with something far older and far more terrifying. The telegram arrived at the Office of Strategic Services headquarters in Washington, D.C. on February 18, 1943. It was marked urgent and classified, routed directly to Colonel William Donovan, head of America's newest intelligence agency. The message was brief, clinical in its language, but the implications were anything but routine. 15 workers missing. Stop construction camp 7. Alaska Highway. Stop bodies recovered. Stop cause of death undetermined. Stop recommend immediate investigation. Stop. Donovan read it 3 times, then reached for his secure telephone. Within 6 hours, Agent Catherine Morrison was on a military transport plane heading north. Within 12 hours, she would wish she had never opened that telegram. Catherine was 32 years old, a former anthropology professor at Columbia University who had been recruited into the OSS for her expertise in indigenous cultures and languages. She spoke 5 Native American languages fluently and had spent years studying tribal histories across North America. The OSS had used her primarily for intelligence gathering among Native populations near sensitive military installations. This assignment seemed routine. Worker disappearances at a construction site, probably desertion, maybe a labor dispute, possibly even espionage. The Alaska Highway project was strategic, a supply line to support the Soviet Union's fight against Nazi Germany. Japanese intelligence would love to disrupt it. But when Catherine's plane touched down at Camp 7 on February 20th, she knew immediately this was something else entirely. The construction camp sat in a valley surrounded by steep mountains and dense forest. The Alaska-Canada border was 10 miles south. The nearest town was Whitehorse, over 100 miles away. In winter, this was one of the most isolated places on Earth. Temperatures dropped to 40 below zero. Daylight lasted barely 6 hours. The landscape was beautiful and merciless in equal measure. Major Robert Chen met her at the airstrip. He was U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, 45 years old, a veteran of the Great War who had seen combat in France. But Catherine noticed his hands were shaking as he helped her out of the plane. "Agent Morrison, thank you for coming so quickly. I apologize for the urgency, but the situation has deteriorated since we sent the telegram." "Deteriorated how?" Chen glanced at the tree line, then back at her. 3 more men went missing last night. We found 2 of them this morning. What was left of them? He led her to a Quonset hut that served as the camp's medical facility. Inside, 2 bodies lay on examination tables, covered with tarps. The camp doctor, a thin man in his 50s named Harris, stood nearby with a clipboard. His face was pale. "I've been a surgeon for 23 years, Harris said without preamble. "Served in the last war. I've seen what artillery does to human bodies. I've seen men torn apart by shrapnel, burned by fire, crushed by debris. This is different. This is worse." He pulled back the first tarp. Catherine had to fight not to step backward. The body was that of a man in his 30s, or had been. Large portions of flesh were missing from the torso, arms, and legs. But these weren't clean, surgical cuts, or the ragged tears of animal attack. The edges of the wounds were marked with what looked like bite marks. Very large bite marks. Teeth patterns suggest a jaw approximately 12 inches wide, Harris continued, his voice professionally detached in a way that barely masked his horror. The force required to bite through human muscle and bone like this would be enormous, far beyond any known animal in this region. Bears? Catherine asked, though she already suspected the answer. Bears hibernate this time of year, and bear teeth don't match these marks. These are more human in structure, incisors, canines, molars, but scaled up, like a human jaw, but 3 times the size. Chen spoke up. There's more. Come outside. They walked to the edge of camp where the forest began. The snow was disturbed, trampled by many feet. Chen pointed to a set of tracks that led from the workers' barracks toward the trees. These are from the victims, running. You can see the panic in the gait, the way the prints are deeper at the toes. They were fleeing something. He pointed to another set of tracks, much larger. Catherine knelt to examine them more closely. The footprints were humanoid. 5 toes, a heel, an arch. But they were enormous. 18 inches long, 8 inches wide. Whatever made them stood much taller than any human. And the depth of the impressions in the frozen snow suggested immense weight. How many? Catherine asked quietly. At least 3 distinct sets of prints, maybe more. They come from the north, from the higher elevations. They approached the camp. The men ran. The tracks converge in the forest. Then they return north, deeper prints going back, like they were carrying something heavy. The missing men. That's our assumption, yes. Catherine stood, her mind racing. She had studied Native American legends extensively. Every tribe in North America had stories of giants. The Cherokee spoke of the Tzul'kalu. The Lakota feared the Iya. The Iroquois told tales of the stone giants. But she had always assumed these were mythological, metaphorical representations of natural dangers or enemy tribes. Looking at these tracks, she was no longer sure. I need to speak with your native workers, she said. Do you have any Tlingit laborers on site? Chen nodded. About 40, but they've been trying to quit since the disappearances started. Actually, some of them tried to quit before the disappearances. Said the location was cursed. We thought they were just superstitious. Take me to them. Now. The Tlingit workers had their own section of camp. Separate barracks that reflected both segregation practices of the era and their own preference to stay together. Catherine found them gathered around a fire barrel, speaking in low voices. When she approached and greeted them in Tlingit, their conversation stopped. An older man stepped forward. His name was Samuel Yale, and his weathered face suggested he was in his 60s, though he moved with the strength of someone much younger. You speak our language, he said. It wasn't a question. I do. My name is Catherine Morrison. I'm here to investigate what happened to the missing men. You know what happened. Your major knows what happened. The question is whether you will listen. I'm listening now." Samuel studied her for a long moment, then gestured for her to follow him away from the other workers. They walked to the edge of camp where they could speak privately. "Your people came here with machines and dynamite," Samuel began. "You carved into the mountains, blasted through ancient ice, disturbed places that have been sleeping for generations. We told the foreman this land was forbidden. We told them the Kushtaka lived here. They laughed at us, called us primitive, superstitious, said we were trying to avoid work. Tell me about the Kushtaka. You know our language, but do you know our stories?" "I know some. The Kushtaka are shapeshifters in Tlingit tradition, tricksters who lure people to their deaths, usually depicted as otter-like beings." Samuel shook his head. "That is the story we tell children. The safe story. The one that makes them cautious near water and respectful of nature. But there is another story, an older one, the true one." He pulled his coat tighter against the cold wind. "Long ago, before my people came to this land, others lived here. The first people, giants. They were tall as trees, strong as stone, and they ate anything they could catch. Deer, bear, whale, and humans. When the first humans came to Alaska, the giants hunted them. This was a time of great fear. A time when to walk in the forest was to risk being eaten." Catherine felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. "Our ancestors fought them. Many died. But humans were clever, and giants were few. We learned they slept in the deep ice, in glacier caves where the cold kept them dormant for long periods. So we sealed the caves. We marked the places they slept. We made these lands forbidden. And for generations, they stayed asleep. And now? Now your people have broken the seals. The dynamite, the excavation, the heat from your machines, you woke them. And they are hungry, very hungry. Hundreds of years hungry." Catherine wanted to dismiss this as superstition, as myth given power by fear and isolation. But she kept seeing those tracks, those bite marks, the sheer size of whatever had attacked the workers. "If what you're saying is true, why are you still here? Why haven't you left?" Samuel's expression was grim. "Because they know we are here now. They know humans have returned to this valley. If we run, they will follow. They will track us through the snow, and they will catch us, because they are faster than any man. Our only chance is to fight, to kill them as our ancestors did. But we cannot do it alone. We need your soldiers, your weapons, your help." The army mom isn't going to believe this. They'll think it's bears or wolves, or maybe Japanese infiltrators. They won't believe in giants. Then more men will die, and eventually the giants will grow bold enough to attack in daylight. They will raid the camp itself, and everyone here will be food. He met her eyes, including you, Catherine Morrison, who speaks our tongue, including you. That night, Catherine sat in Major Chen's office and wrote her preliminary report. She documented the bodies, the tracks, the bite marks, Samuel's testimony. She tried to present it objectively, scientifically, without jumping to conclusions that would get her dismissed as hysterical or unstable. But as she wrote, she kept thinking about those footprints in the snow, about men torn apart and partially eaten, about the certainty in Samuel's voice when he spoke of the giants. At 11 p.m., the camp's perimeter alarm began to ring. Catherine grabbed her coat and ran outside. Soldiers were rushing toward the northern fence line, rifles in hand. Major Chen was already there, binoculars raised, staring into the darkness beyond the floodlights. "What is it?" Catherine asked, breathless from running in the cold. "Movement, large movement, multiple contacts." Chen lowered the binoculars and turned to her. His face was white. "Agent Morrison, I need you to look at something and tell me I am seeing things." He handed her the binoculars and pointed to a spot about 200 yards out, just at the edge where the floodlight's reach faded into shadow. Catherine raised the binoculars and adjusted the focus. There, at the tree line, stood 3 figures. Humanoid, but massive. They had to be 9 or 10 feet tall, with broad shoulders and long arms that hung past their knees. They were covered in matted hair or fur, their faces broad and flat, with pronounced brow ridges, and they were watching the camp. Not moving, not hiding, just standing there, observing. As Catherine watched, one of them opened its mouth. Even at this distance, even through the binoculars, she could see the size of its teeth, could see the intelligence in its eyes. It was looking directly at her. Then, as if on some unspoken signal, all 3 turned and walked back into the forest. Not rushing, not fleeing, just walking away with the casual confidence of apex predators who knew they had nothing to fear. The camp fell silent. 50 men stood at the fence line, staring at where the figures had been. No one spoke, no one moved, because they all understood, even if they couldn't articulate it yet, that everything had changed. The things in the forest were real, they were intelligent, and they were coming back. Major Chen finally found his voice. "Get everyone inside. Double the perimeter guards. No one goes anywhere alone. And someone get me a direct line to Anchorage Command. We need reinforcements, heavy weapons, and someone who knows how to fight something that shouldn't exist." Catherine watched the tree line for a long moment more before following the others inside, as Samuel's words echoed in her mind. They know humans have returned to this valley. Looking at the darkness beyond the camp's lights, Catherine realized they weren't the ones conducting an investigation anymore. They were being hunted. And their hunters had just announced themselves. The war had come to Alaska. But it wasn't the war anyone expected. It was older, darker, and far more terrifying than anything humanity had created. Operation Stonecoat was about to begin. The reinforcements arrived 3 days later. Not the heavy weapons and additional troops Major Chen had requested, but something Catherine found far more valuable. A man. Colonel James Whitmore stepped off the transport plane carrying a single duffel bag and wearing the kind of expression that suggested he had seen things that made Alaska's problems seem almost routine. He was OSS, like Catherine, but from a different division. The division that didn't officially exist. "Agent Morrison," he said, shaking her hand with a grip that was firm, but not aggressive. "I've read your report. Twice. Most people in Washington think you've lost your mind. Fortunately for you, I'm not most people. You believe me? I've spent the last 2 years investigating unusual enemy activity in the Pacific Theater. And by unusual, I mean things that don't fit any known intelligence pattern. Things that suggest we're not the only ones dealing with phenomena outside normal warfare." He glanced toward the forest. "Giants eating construction workers in Alaska? That's actually one of the more straightforward cases I've handled." Over coffee, in the mess hall, Whitmore explained his presence. "The OSS has a small unit dedicated to what we call anomalous threats, things that fall outside conventional military doctrine. We've had reports from Burma of soldiers encountering massive ape-like creatures. The British have documented similar incidents in India. The Germans apparently had entire SS units dedicated to hunting for supernatural weapons and artifacts. We dismissed most of it as propaganda or psychological warfare, but the evidence keeps accumulating. So the government knows these things exist. Some people in the government suspect these things might exist. There's a difference. We don't have proof. We have reports, anecdotes, testimony from shell-shocked soldiers that could easily be explained by trauma or stress. But your case is different. You have bodies, tracks, photographs, witnesses who saw them clearly. What do you need from me? I need you to help me kill them, or at least drive them away long enough to finish the highway. Because this project is critical to the war effort, and we can't abandon it because of monsters, no matter how real those monsters are." That night, Whitmore, Catherine, Major Chen, and Samuel Yale met in Chen's office to plan their response. A map of the surrounding terrain covered the desk. "The attacks follow a pattern," Chen explained, marking locations with red pins. "They come from the north, always from higher elevation. They strike at night, always between midnight and 4 a.m. They target isolated workers or small groups. They're smart enough to avoid large concentrations of armed men." Samuel pointed to a spot on the map about 15 miles north of the camp. "There, the old Glacier caves. My grandfather told me stories about sealing the entrances after the last giant was trapped inside. That was before I was born. Before any living Tlingit walked this land. We thought they were all dead. We were wrong." "How many are we dealing with?" Whitmore asked. "Hard to say. We've identified 3 distinct individuals from the tracks, but there could be more. They don't all hunt together." Catherine spoke up. "Samuel, your ancestors fought these creatures. What worked? How did they kill them?" "Fire, blade, numbers. The giants are strong, but they can be killed. Their skin is tough, like leather that has been frozen and thawed many times. Bullets might not penetrate deep enough unless you have heavy caliber weapons, but they can burn. And if you cut them deep enough, they bleed. They can die. The problem," Chen interjected, "is that we have limited heavy weapons. This is a construction operation, not a combat unit. We have rifles, some machine guns, dynamite for excavation. That's it. I've requested reinforcements, but they won't arrive for at least a week. Maybe more." Whitmore studied the map. "Then we can't wait for them. If these things attack in force, they could kill dozens of men before help arrives. We need to take the fight to them. Go to the caves, find their lair, eliminate the threat at its source. That's insane, Chen said flatly. Sending men into the wilderness to hunt creatures we barely understand. In winter, in Alaska, it's WWII. It's tactical thinking, Whitmore corrected. Right now, we're defensive. Waiting for them to attack, reacting to their movements. That's how you lose. We need to become the hunters. And we need to do it before they realize we're vulnerable. Samuel nodded slowly. This is how my ancestors won. They did not wait in their villages for the giants to come. They tracked them to their caves and trapped them there, sealed them in. Let the ice and time do the killing. Can we do that again? Catherine asked. Seal the caves, maybe. But first we must know if this is where they sleep. And if there are more than 3. The plan took shape over the next 2 hours. A small team would approach the glacier caves on skis, traveling light and fast. They would observe, gather intelligence, and if possible, block the entrances with explosives. The team would consist of Whitmore, Catherine, Samuel, 4 Army volunteers, and 2 other Tlingit trackers who knew the terrain. Major Chen insisted on coming too. These are my men dying. I'm not sending a team into danger while I stay safe in camp. They departed at dawn 2 days later. The temperature was 25 below zero. The sun barely cleared the horizon, providing only dim gray light that turned the snow-covered landscape into a monochrome nightmare. They traveled in single file, Samuel in the lead, following paths only he could see. Catherine had never experienced cold like this. It seeped through every layer of clothing, found every gap, every opening. Her breath froze in her lungs, her eyelashes crusted with ice. The world became nothing but the rhythmic push of skis, the scrape of poles, the endless white landscape stretching in every direction. They reached the foothills by early afternoon and began to climb. The glacier caves were located in a cliff face about 1,000 feet above the valley floor. As they ascended, Catherine noticed marks in the snow, not tracks exactly, but disturbances, places where something large had passed. They used this route, Samuel said quietly, up and down the mountain. Hunting trail. As they climbed higher, the signs became more obvious. Bones scattered across the snow. Deer, caribou, and other animals, all split open, the marrow extracted. Some were recent, the blood still red against the white snow. And then the smell hit them. Even in the freezing air, even through the ice crystals that hung suspended in the atmosphere, the stench was overwhelming. Rot, decay, the unmistakable odor of death and predation. "We're close," Samuel said. The cave entrance appeared suddenly, a dark mouth in the cliff face partially obscured by ice and snow. It was huge, easily 12 feet tall and 8 feet wide. The ice around the entrance had been broken away recently, shattered and cast aside in chunks. "The seal," Samuel said, pointing to marks in the rock. Catherine could see where something had been carved into the stone, symbols and patterns that time had eroded. My ancestors' work. Broken. Whitmore signaled for everyone to stop and take cover behind nearby rocks. He pulled out binoculars and studied the cave entrance for several minutes. "I don't see movement, but I can see tracks going in and out, multiple sets. This is definitely their lair." "Do we go in?" Chen asked. Hell no. We don't know the layout. Don't know how many are inside. Don't know if there are other exits. We'd be walking into a death trap. Whitmore lowered the binoculars. We set charges at the entrance. Bring down enough rock and ice to seal it. Trap them inside like Samuel's ancestors did. They spent the next hour carefully placing dynamite around the cave mouth. Catherine watched the dark entrance nervously, expecting at any moment to see those massive figures emerge. But the cave remained silent, dark, waiting. When the charges were set, they retreated to a safe distance. Chen checked his watch. Another hour until sunset. If we're going to do this, we need to do it now, before they come back from hunting. Whitmore nodded and prepared to trigger the detonator. That's when they heard it. A sound from inside the cave. Not words, not human language, but communication nonetheless. A deep, resonant vocalization that carried power and intelligence. And it was answered by another voice, and another. "There's more than 3, Catherine whispered. "There's a whole family in there." The first giant emerged from the cave entrance. It was even larger than the ones they had seen at the camp. 12 feet tall easily. Its body covered in thick, matted hair that was reddish-brown in color. Its face was almost human, but distorted, as if someone had taken human features and stretched them across a skull twice too large. And its eyes found them immediately. The giant roared. The sound echoed across the mountainside, a challenge and a threat that made Catherine's bones vibrate. It was answered by more roars from inside the cave. "Blow it," Whitmore said. "Blow it now." Chen triggered the detonator. The explosions were massive, a chain of blasts that shook the mountain and sent huge chunks of rock and ice cascading down. The giant at the cave entrance was caught in the avalanche, buried under tons of debris. Its roar became a scream, then silence. But the cave didn't collapse entirely. The entrance was partially blocked, but not sealed. And through the gaps in the rubble, Catherine could see movement, could hear more roars, angry roars. "It's not enough," Samuel said. "We did not bring enough explosive. The cave is too large, too deep, they can dig out." More figures appeared in the gaps, trying to force their way through the rubble, massive hands gripping stone, pulling rocks aside with terrifying strength. "Fall back," Whitmore ordered. "Now, move." They skied down the mountain as fast as the terrain allowed, abandoning caution for speed. Behind them, the roars grew louder, more numerous. The giants were emerging from the cave, no longer content to hunt at night, no longer willing to be patient. The war had begun. They made it back to camp after dark, exhausted and frostbitten. Major Chen immediately ordered all workers into the central buildings and put every soldier on high alert. Floodlights were turned on at full power, illuminating the camp's perimeter. Machine guns were positioned at key defensive points. In the command center, the team reported what they had found. Whitmore's expression was grim. "We can't seal them in. We don't have enough explosives. And even if we did, they're too strong. They'd dig out eventually. Which means we have to fight them. Here. Tonight. Because they know where we are now. And they know we tried to trap them. They're going to come for us." Catherine felt the weight of responsibility crushing down on her. This had started as an investigation into missing workers. Now, it was a battle for survival against creatures that shouldn't exist. "How do we fight them?" she asked. "We have rifles and a few machine guns. Samuel said bullets might not penetrate deep enough." "Then we get creative," Whitmore said. He turned to Chen. "You have excavation equipment, diesel fuel, welding equipment. We can make weapons, firebombs, incendiaries, things that will burn hot enough to kill them." Over the next few hours, the camp transformed into a fortress. Workers and soldiers created Molotov cocktails using fuel and bottles. They positioned drums of gasoline at strategic points that could be ignited to create walls of fire. They set up crossfire zones where machine guns could concentrate their fire, and they waited. Samuel and his fellow Tlingit workers prepared in their own way, chanting prayers in their language, asking ancestors for strength and guidance. Catherine watched them and felt a strange sense of connection. Modern military might and ancient warrior tradition, coming together to face a threat that predated both. At 10 p.m., the first giant appeared at the edge of the floodlights. Then another, then another. By midnight, 7 of them surrounded the camp, just beyond the reach of the lights, watching, planning. Catherine could see intelligence in the way they moved, the way they communicated with gestures and vocalizations. These weren't mindless beasts. They were thinking, reasoning beings who had developed their own tactics over countless years of hunting. And then, at exactly 1 a.m., they attacked. They came from 3 directions simultaneously, moving with terrifying speed. The machine guns opened up, bullets tearing into giant flesh. Some fell, roaring in pain, but others kept coming. The first giant reached the fence line and simply tore through it, ripping chain link and posts from the ground like they were made of paper. A soldier threw a Molotov cocktail. It exploded against the giant's chest, and suddenly the creature was ablaze, screaming and thrashing. But even burning, it kept fighting for nearly a minute before finally collapsing. More giants breached the perimeter. The camp descended into chaos. Soldiers fired desperately. Workers ran for cover. Tlingit warriors engaged in close combat with spears and axes, their courage beyond measure. Catherine found herself face to face with one of the creatures. It was wounded, bleeding from multiple bullet wounds, but still deadly. It reached for her with a massive hand, its mouth opening to reveal teeth the size of knives. She pulled her pistol and fired every round into its face at point-blank range. The giant staggered, blood pouring from its ruined features, and collapsed backward into the snow. The battle lasted nearly an hour. When it was over, 4 giants lay dead or dying in the camp. 3 had retreated back into the wilderness. The casualties on the human side were severe. 15 dead, 23 wounded. The camp itself was partially destroyed. But they had survived. They had proven these creatures could be killed. As dawn broke over the devastated camp, Catherine stood beside Whitmore and Samuel, looking at the carnage. "This isn't over," Whitmore said. 3 escaped. "They'll heal, they'll plan, they'll come back. Then we finish it," Samuel replied. "We go back to the caves. With more men, more weapons, more fire. We end this the way our ancestors should have ended it, completely." Catherine nodded, too exhausted to argue, too traumatized to think clearly. She had come to Alaska to investigate missing workers. Now she was planning an assault on a species that had been legends. Real legends, living nightmares. Operation Stonecoat had truly begun. The reinforcements arrived 5 days after the attack. 2 platoons of infantry, heavy machine guns, flamethrowers, and enough explosives to level a small mountain. The army was taking the threat seriously now. Too many men had died. Too many witnesses had seen things that couldn't be explained away. But more importantly, word had spread among the native workers throughout Alaska. The Tlingit, Athabascan, and Inuit communities were sharing stories, comparing legends. The giants weren't isolated to one location. Similar creatures had been reported across Alaska and northern Canada for generations, always in remote areas, always in places where the ice was thick and old. "We're not dealing with a single family," Whitmore explained during the briefing for the assault team. "We're dealing with a species, scattered, hibernating, waking up as we push further into wilderness areas. The construction, the mining, the military installations, we're disturbing their territory." Catherine looked at the map spread across the table. Red pins marked reported sightings and attacks across hundreds of miles. "How many are we talking about?" "Impossible to say. Dozens, maybe hundreds. Most are probably still dormant in glacier caves. But as climate patterns change, as we continue to build in these areas, more will wake." Major Chen, his arm in a sling from the battle, pointed to the glacier cave location. "For now, we focus on eliminating the immediate threat. The group that attacked us. 7 confirmed individuals, 4 dead, 3 escaped. We tracked them back to their lair, and we finished this." The assault team consisted of 40 soldiers, 15 Tlingit warriors, led by Samuel, and a handful of OSS agents, including Catherine and Whitmore. They were equipped with the best weapons available: Browning machine guns, Springfield rifles, flamethrowers, and enough incendiary explosives to create an inferno inside the glacier caves. They departed at dawn on March 2nd, 1943. The weather had improved slightly. Temperature was only 15 below. The sky was clear. It would have been beautiful under different circumstances. The journey to the caves took most of the day. This time, they moved as a military unit, organized and prepared. They established a base camp at the foot of the cliff and sent reconnaissance teams to scout the area. The scouts reported disturbing findings. The cave system was larger than they had initially thought. Multiple entrances, tunnels that seemed to go deep into the mountain, and signs of recent activity. Fresh tracks, bones, the smell of death. "They're definitely using this as a base," the lead scout reported. "But I couldn't see how far back the caves go. Could be hundreds of yards, could be miles." Whitmore made the decision. "We can't go in blind. We need to draw them out, force them into the open, where we have the advantage." Samuel suggested a strategy. "Giants are territorial. They defend their home. If we threaten the caves, if we make noise and show ourselves, they will come out to drive us away." So they created a perimeter around the main cave entrance, positioned machine guns and flamethrowers at optimal angles, set up explosive charges that could be triggered to create barriers of fire. And they waited. They didn't have to wait long. As the sun began to set, movement came from inside the caves. Not the 3 survivors from the previous attack. More. Many more. The first giant emerged slowly, cautiously. It was massive, even larger than the others they had encountered. Its reddish-brown hair was streaked with white, suggesting great age. Scars covered its body, old wounds from battles long past. It surveyed the human forces arrayed before it and let out a roar that shook the mountain. The response came from inside the caves. More roars, more giants emerging into the fading light. Catherine counted them. 5, 7, 10, 12. "Dear God," Chen whispered. There's a whole tribe in there." The largest giant, the scarred leader, stepped forward. It looked directly at the human forces, and Catherine saw something in its eyes that chilled her more than any attack could. Intelligence, understanding, and terrible, ancient fury. It knew they had come to destroy its kind. It knew this was an extinction war. The giant leader gestured to its tribe, a sweeping motion that was clearly a command. Then it pointed at the humans and roared again. The attack came like an avalanche. 12 giants charging down the mountainside with terrifying speed. The soldiers opened fire immediately. Machine gun rounds tearing into massive flesh. Rifles cracking in steady rhythm. The first giant fell, then the second, but the others kept coming. "Flamethrowers!" Whitmore shouted. Now, streams of liquid fire arced through the air, catching 2 giants directly. They screamed, voices so loud and terrible that several soldiers dropped their weapons to cover their ears. The burning giants thrashed and rolled in the snow, trying to extinguish the flames, but napalm doesn't stop burning just because you want it to. The battle became chaos. Giants broke through the defensive line. Soldiers fought in small groups, using every weapon at their disposal. The Tlingit warriors engaged with spears and axes, their traditional weapons proving effective at close range where giants couldn't use their full strength. Catherine found herself separated from the main force, backed against a rock face with her pistol in hand. A giant approached, wounded but still deadly. Its eyes locked on hers, and she saw something she didn't expect. Not mindless hunger, not animal rage, but grief. This creature was mourning its fallen tribe members, fighting not from savagery, but from desperate protection of its home. For a moment, Catherine hesitated. Who were the real monsters here? The giants who had lived in these mountains for millennia, or the humans who had invaded their territory, destroyed their peace, and now sought to exterminate them? The giant lunged. Catherine fired every round. The creature collapsed at her feet, breathing its last, blood pooling in the snow. She would never forget the look in its eyes as it died. The battle lasted 2 hours. When it was over, 9 giants lay dead. 3 had escaped back into the caves, including the scarred leader. The human casualties were severe, 18 dead, 26 wounded. But they had held the line. Whitmore gave the order to seal the caves. Engineers placed the explosives, hundreds of pounds of TNT positioned to bring down the entire cliff face. If the remaining giants were inside, they would be entombed forever. Samuel approached Catherine as they prepared for the final detonation. My ancestors did this, sealed the caves, thought they had ended the threat. But some always survive. Some always escape. This cycle will repeat. Humans push into the wilderness. Giants wake. We fight. We seal the caves. And in another generation, another century, it happens again. What's the alternative? Catherine asked, exhausted and traumatized. We learn to share the land. We mark the places where giants sleep. We don't disturb them. We let them be. The world doesn't work that way anymore. Humans need resources, need space. We're not going to stop expanding. Then the war will never end. The explosives detonated with a roar that echoed across the valley. The cliff face collapsed, bringing down millions of tons of rock and ice. The cave entrances vanished under the avalanche. Dust and snow billowed into the air, obscuring everything. When it cleared, the caves were gone, buried, sealed. But Catherine noticed something. Samuel was staring at the tree line to the east. Following his gaze, she saw 3 massive shapes moving through the forest. Distant, fleeing, the survivors. They had escaped. Again. The team returned to Camp 7 3 days later. The wounded were evacuated to military hospitals. The dead were buried with full military honors. Official reports listed the casualties as resulting from hostile action and extreme weather conditions. No mention of giants. No mention of Operation Stonecoat. Catherine and Whitmore were called back to Washington for debriefing. In a secure OSS facility, they presented their findings to a small group of senior officials. The reaction was exactly what Catherine expected. Skepticism, disbelief, accusations of mass hysteria, and trauma-induced hallucinations. Until Whitmore showed them the photographs. Clear images of giant bodies taken in daylight. Measurements proving they were over 10 feet tall. Dental analysis of the bite marks on victims showing teeth far larger than any known animal. The room fell silent. Finally, one of the officials spoke. If this is real, if these creatures exist, what do you recommend? Whitmore didn't hesitate. We create a protocol. Identify areas where these creatures might be hibernating. Restrict access. Monitor for activity. And if they wake, if they pose a threat, we respond with overwhelming force. But we do it quietly. No public knowledge. No mass panic. And if they spread? If there are more of them in other locations? Then we deal with them case by case. The important thing is containment. Keep the public ignorant. Keep the military prepared. Over the next 6 months, Operation Stonecoat evolved from a single combat mission into a permanent program. The OSS, and later the CIA, maintained files on anomalous creature sightings across North America. Military installations in Alaska and northern Canada were given special briefings on how to respond to unusual wildlife encounters. Certain areas were designated as restricted zones, not officially because of giants, but citing various military and environmental reasons. The public accepted the restrictions without question. Catherine remained with the program for another 2 years before returning to academic life. She never spoke publicly about what she had seen. The official story was that she had served as a liaison with native populations during the war. Unremarkable, routine. But she kept the photographs, kept the reports, kept the memories of those creatures dying in the snow, their eyes full of intelligence and grief. Samuel Yeel returned to his tribe. He shared the story with the elders, who added it to their oral traditions. The Tlingit people continued to mark the old places, to warn their children about the Kushtaka, to remember that the wilderness held more than just trees and snow. And in the decades that followed, reports continued to come in. Hikers vanishing in Alaska, construction workers finding enormous bones in glacier caves, rangers reporting tracks that didn't match any known animal. Each time, quiet military units responded. Each time, the incidents were explained away. Each time, the files grew thicker. Operation Stonecoat never ended. It evolved, adapted, continued. Because the giants never truly went away. They were still there, sleeping in the ice, waiting for the next disturbance. And as the climate warmed, as glaciers melted and humans pushed further into the wilderness, more of them woke up. The war continued. Quietly, secretly, but it continued. Present day on 2019. The email arrived in Dr. Sarah Morrison's inbox on a Monday morning in October. It was flagged as high priority and encrypted with government-level security. Sarah was a climate scientist at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, specializing in glacier melt patterns. She received plenty of government correspondence about her research, but this one was different. The sender was listed only as Department of Defense, Special Projects Division. She opened it with growing curiosity. The message was brief. Dr. Morrison, your recent paper on accelerated glacier melt in the Brooks Range has come to our attention. We need to discuss your findings in person. Specifically, your data regarding the Cave Creek Glacier System. This is a matter of national security. A representative will contact you within 24 hours. Please keep this communication confidential. Sarah stared at the screen, confused. Her research was environmental science, not military intelligence. What did the Department of Defense care about glacier melt rates? The representative arrived the next morning. He was in his 50s, wearing a civilian suit but carrying himself with military bearing. He showed her credentials identifying him as Agent Marcus Chen, CIA Special Activities Division. Dr. Morrison, thank you for seeing me. I understand this must seem unusual. Let me get right to the point. Your great-grandmother was Catherine Morrison. She worked for the OSS during World War II. Sarah nodded slowly. I know. She passed away when I was 12. She never talked much about her wartime service. That's because most of it remains classified. But circumstances have changed, and we need someone we can trust. Someone with expertise in glacier systems. Someone who understands the scientific side of what's happening. What is happening? Agent Chen opened his briefcase and removed a folder. Top secret stamps covered the front. Inside were photographs, reports, and what looked like old military documents from the 1940s. Your great-grandmother was part of an operation called Stonecoat. In 1943, she and a team of soldiers and OSS agents fought and killed 12 hostile entities in the Alaska Territory. Entities that official records describe as unknown, large predators. But the classified records tell a different story. He placed a photograph on Sarah's desk. It showed a massive humanoid creature, easily 10 feet tall, lying dead in the snow. Soldiers stood round it for scale. The image was clearly authentic, not a hoax or manipulation. Giants, Chen said simply. Your great-grandmother fought giants, and we need you because they're waking up again. Over the next hour, Chen explained everything. The original Operation Stonecoat, the protocol that had been maintained for 76 years, the restricted zones across Alaska and northern Canada that were really giant hibernation sites, and the current crisis. Climate change is melting the glaciers faster than predicted. Cave systems that have been frozen for millennia are opening up, and the creatures inside are waking. We've had 17 incidents in the last 2 years. Hikers killed, construction sites attacked. Each time that we respond, we contain it. We cover it up. But it's getting worse. Why are you telling me this? Because your research pinpoints exactly where the glacier melt is most severe, which means you can help us predict where giants are most likely to wake next. We need advance warning. Time to evacuate civilians, position response teams, prevent casualties. Sarah felt like reality was fracturing around her. Giants. Her great-grandmother had fought giants and never told anyone, and now they were waking up because of climate change. I need proof, she said. I need more than old photos and stories. Then come with me. We have a situation developing right now. Cave Creek Glacier, your research area. Something big just emerged from a recently opened cave system. We're assembling a response team. Come see for yourself. 48 hours later, Sarah found herself on a helicopter flying over the Brooks Range. Below, the landscape was both familiar and alien. She had studied these glaciers for years, but she had never imagined what they contained. The response team consisted of CIIA agents, Army Rangers, and 3 Tlingit advisors, who maintained the traditional knowledge passed down through generations. One of them was Thomas Yale, great-grandson of Samuel Yale, who had fought alongside Catherine Morrison. Your great-grandmother was brave, Thomas told Sarah, as they prepared their equipment. My great-grandfather spoke of her often, said she respected our knowledge, fought beside our warriors. When this is over, there is much I can tell you about those days. The helicopter set down in a valley 3 miles from the target location. Through binoculars, Sarah could see the cave entrance, a dark mouth in the glacier face that hadn't existed 5 years ago. Melt water cascaded from the opening, a sign of how much ice had disappeared. And standing in front of the cave, clearly visible even at this distance, was a giant. It was exactly like the photographs from 1943, massive, covered in reddish-brown hair, moving with an intelligence that no ordinary animal possessed. It was testing the air, looking around at a world that had changed dramatically since it last walked here. Agent Chen studied the creature through a high-powered scope. Lone individual. Probably just woke up, disoriented, hungry. We need to eliminate it before it wanders toward populated areas. Kill it? Sarah asked. Shouldn't we study it? These creatures are scientifically incredible. They're survivors from the Pleistocene era, living fossils. They're also apex predators that eat humans. Your great-grandmother learned that the hard way. We've tried capture and study before. It never works. They're too strong, too intelligent, too dangerous. The team moved into position. Sharpshooters with heavy caliber rifles. Soldiers with incendiary rounds. Tlingit advisors with traditional weapons that had been upgraded with modern materials, but maintained the same basic designs that had worked centuries ago. Sarah watched through binoculars as they approached the giant. It noticed them immediately, its head swiveling to track their movement. For a moment, nothing happened. The giant just watched, curious, cautious. Then one of the soldiers fired a warning shot, the round impacting the ice near the giant's feet. The giant roared. The sound was incredible, primal, full of rage and fear. It charged. The battle was brief and brutal. The giant was fast, covering ground with terrifying speed. But it was also disoriented, weak from hibernation, facing modern weapons it couldn't understand. The heavy rifles tore into it. Incendiary rounds set its hair aflame. Within 3 minutes, it was down. Sarah watched it die. Even from a distance, even knowing it was necessary, it felt wrong. This creature had survived for thousands of years, had endured ice ages and climate shifts. And now, it was gone, killed because it woke into a world that no longer had room for it. After the battle, the team moved closer to examine the body. Sarah approached with scientific fascination overriding her horror. The creature was male, approximately 11 feet tall, weighing an estimated 800 pounds. Its anatomy was humanoid but distinct. Larger jaw muscles, different bone density, more efficient body heat retention. Gigantopithecus, she said quietly, or something like it. An evolutionary branch we thought went extinct 300,000 years ago. Agent Chen stood beside her. Your great-grandmother asked the same questions, whether they should be preserved, studied. She concluded they were too dangerous, that humanity's survival required their extinction. Do you agree? Sarah thought about climate change, about glacier melt, about the 16 other incidents Chen had mentioned. How many more are there? How many are still frozen? We don't know. Conservative estimates suggest dozens across Alaska and northern Canada. Could be more. Every year, more ice melts, more caves open, more giants wake. Then we need a different approach. We can't just kill them as they emerge. We need to be proactive. Identify hibernation sites before they thaw. Establish permanent monitoring. Maybe even relocate them to secure facilities where they can be studied safely. We've considered it. The logistics are nightmare. The cost is astronomical. And the risk of public discovery is too high. Can you imagine the panic if people knew these things existed? Can you imagine the moral cost of driving them to extinction? These are intelligent beings. Your own reports say they communicate, use tools, feel emotions. They're not just animals. They're people. Different people, but people nonetheless. Chen was quiet for a long moment. Your great-grandmother said something similar. After the battle at the Glacier caves, she wondered if humans were the real monsters. But she also knew that sometimes survival requires terrible choices. Over the next few weeks, Sarah was brought fully into the Stonecoat program. She learned about the protocols, the restricted zones, the history of encounters, and she began working on a new approach. Using her climate models, she identified 37 sites where glacier melt was most likely to expose giant hibernation caves within the next 10 years. Each site was assessed for risk level, proximity to human populations, and accessibility for response teams. But she also proposed something radical. A preservation program. Select sites where giants could potentially wake but remain isolated. Areas so remote that human contact would be unlikely. Monitor them carefully, but allow the giants to exist in their natural habitat. You're suggesting we create giant reservations, Chen said when she presented the proposal. I'm suggesting we find a way to coexist. These creatures aren't invading our territory. We invaded theirs. We woke them from hibernation. The ethical response isn't extermination. It's accommodation. The proposal went up the chain of command. Debates raged in classified meetings. Some officials argued for complete eradication, while resources and secrecy allowed it. Others saw Sarah's point about the moral implications. In the end, a compromise was reached. High-risk sites near populated areas would continue to be actively managed, with giants eliminated as they emerged. But low-risk, remote sites would be designated as preserve zones. Giants there would be monitored but not disturbed unless they posed an active threat. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't what Sarah really wanted. But it was something. Gay Punts. Later, 2020. Sarah stood in her great-grandmother's old house in Virginia, sorting through boxes of belongings that had been in storage for decades. Among the papers and photographs, she found a leather journal. Catherine Morrison's private diary from 1943. Sarah opened it carefully. The pages were yellowed, but the handwriting was clear. She read accounts of the battles, the fear, the horror. But she also found something else: doubts, questions, guilt. One entry in particular stood out, dated March 15, 1943, just after the final assault on the Glacier caves. We won today. We killed them. We sealed their home and called it victory. But as I watched that scarred old giant die, I saw in its eyes something I will never forget. Not animal rage, not mindless hunger, but sorrow. It was protecting its family, its tribe, its home, just as we were protecting ours. Who were the invaders? Who were the real monsters? I fear we have started something that will haunt humanity for generations. We have learned that giants are real, but we have also learned that we will kill anything that stands in the way of our expansion, even beings that were here long before us. God forgive us. God forgive me. Sarah closed the journal, tears in her eyes. Her great-grandmother had understood, had grappled with the same ethical questions, and had carried that burden for the rest of her life. She called Agent Chen. I found my great-grandmother's diary. I wanted to share it with the program. I think people need to understand that this isn't just about tactics and threat elimination. It's about who we are as a species. What kind of world we want to create. That's dangerous thinking, Dr. Morrison. It makes operations difficult when operators start questioning the mission. Good. They should question it. We all should. Because if we don't, if we just keep killing everything that frightens us, everything that doesn't fit our vision of what the world should be, then we're not the heroes of this story. We're the villains. Chen was quiet. Then, I'll pass your recommendation up the chain. But I can't promise anything will change. I know, but maybe planting the seed is enough. Maybe the next generation will find a better way. Present day, 2024. Sarah Morrison stands at a scientific conference presenting her research on glacier preservation. In the audience are climate scientists, environmentalists, and a few people she recognizes from the Stonecoat program. She talks about fragile ecosystems, about species we've driven to extinction, about the responsibility we have to preserve what remains of the wild world. She doesn't mention giants, doesn't show the photographs, doesn't reveal the classified truth she carries. But she plants seeds, makes people think about what we're losing as glaciers melt, makes them consider what ancient mysteries might be locked in the ice. After the presentation, a young man approaches her. He's Tlingit, she can tell from his features and the traditional symbols on his jacket. Dr. Morrison, I'm David Yale. I think you knew my grandfather Thomas. I did. How is he? He passed last year, but before he died, he told me to find you. He said you carry the same questions your great-grandmother carried, about the Kushtaka, about our responsibility to them. What did he want you to tell me? David smiled sadly. That there are more of them than your government knows. That my people still maintain the old knowledge, still mark the forbidden places, and that when the time comes, when the ice is gone, and they all wake, we will need people like you. People who understand that the world is bigger than human ambition. He handed her a small, carved stone. My grandfather made this. It's a map, locations where our ancestors sealed giants centuries ago. Places your agency hasn't found yet. He wanted you to have it. Said maybe you could protect them, give them a chance. Sarah held the stone, feeling the weight of responsibility. Her great-grandmother had fought giants and lived with guilt. Now Sarah had the chance to do something different, to choose preservation over extermination. Thank you, she said. I'll do what I can. As David walked away, Sarah looked at the stone map. Each marking represented a place where giants slept, where ancient beings waited for the ice to release them. The climate would continue to warm. The glaciers would continue to melt. The giants would continue to wake. But maybe, just maybe, humanity could learn to share the world with creatures that predated civilization. Maybe the war didn't have to be eternal. Maybe there was another way. Sarah pocketed the stone and walked out into the anchorage evening. In the distance, mountains rose against the darkening sky. Somewhere in those mountains, in caves of ice and stone, giants slept and dreamed. And Sarah Morrison, great-granddaughter of Catherine Morrison, made a silent promise to them both. To find a better ending to this story. To transform Operation Stonecoat from a war of extermination into a program of coexistence. It wouldn't be easy. It might not even be possible. But it was worth trying. Because some stories deserve to end differently than they began. And some wars need to end before everyone loses.